I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups. You people know that probably better than anybody. And I was just looking at a list of some of the things that we just did. More than 2,500 subpoenas qualified for. And I let everybody talk. I let the White House counsel speak for 30 hours. 30 hours. I have 19 special counsel lawyers, 40 FBI agents. I said, open it all up. Let them have whatever they want. Nearly 500 search warrants. Think of that, a search warrant. Did you ever see a search warrant before? Neither did I. This was over 500 search warrants. And of the 19 people that were heading up this investigation, or whatever you want to call it, with Bob Mueller, they were contributors to the Democrat Party, most of them, and to Hillary Clinton. They hated President Trump. They hated him with a passion. They went to her big party after the election that turned out to be a wake. Not a party, it was a wake. And they were very angry. These are the people that after 2 years and $40 million or $35 million, it'll end up being a lot more than that by the time all the bills are paid. This is what happened. No collusion, no obstruction, no nothing. They issued 50 orders authorizing use of pen registers. Think of that, though, 500 witnesses. And then I have Nancy Pelosi go out and say that the President of the United States engaged in a cover-up. Now, we've had a House investigation. We have Senate investigations. We have investigations like nobody's ever had before, and there's nothing, we did nothing wrong. They would have loved to have said we colluded. They would have loved it. These people were out to get us. The Republican Party and President Trump. They were out to get us. This was a one-sided, horrible thing. The bottom line is they said there's no collusion with Russia. You heard so much talk about phone calls that my son made to me from this meeting that was set up by GPS Fusion, it looks like, which is the other side for those that don't know. And for a year, I heard about phone calls went to a special number, unauthorized. And it would have been my son, Don, who's a good young man, who's gone through hell. And they were calls that must have been made by him before and after the meeting, 3 calls. After massive study and work, they actually found who made the calls. One was a friend of ours, a real estate developer. Great guy, most of you know him, nice guy, loves our country. And the other one was the head of NASCAR, 2 of them. So of the 3 calls that were so horrible that he had a meeting and he called me, and then he had the meeting after, and he made 2 more calls. And they were written about like this little lines, couple of lines. Nobody wanted to admit it. Even last night, we had a great election. I went there on Monday. We had an election for Fred Keller. It was a 50-50 shot, and he won in a landslide. We went and we did a rally. Hardly mentioned today, and yet if he lost, it would have been the biggest story in the country, even bigger than this witch hunt stuff that you guys keep writing about. So here's the bottom line. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. We've been doing this since I've been president, and actually, the crime was committed on the other side. We'll see how that all turns out. I hope it turns out well, but to my way of thinking, and I know a lot of you agree with me, the crime was committed on the other side. This whole thing was a takedown attempt at the President of the United States. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourselves for the way you report it so dishonestly. Not all of you, but many of you. The way you report it. So, I've said from the beginning, right from the beginning, that you probably can't go down two tracks. You can go down the investigation track, and you can go down the investment track, or the track of let's get things done for the American people. I love the American people. Drug prices are coming down, first time in 51 years because of my administration, but we can get them down way lower working with the Democrats. We can solve the problem on the border in 15 minutes if the Democrats would give us a few votes. So I just wanted to let you know that I walked into the room and I told Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, I want to do infrastructure. I want to do it more than you want to do it. I'd be really good at that. That's what I do. But you know what? You can't do it under these circumstances. So get these phony investigations over with. The Wall Street Journal just wrote today, just a little while ago I saw it. Mr. Mueller wasn't obstructed in any way. This is the Wall Street Journal editorial today. Mr. Mueller wasn't obstructed in any way. His copious report, copious, 434 pages. Now they want to interview all of the same people again. They want to interview Jerry Nadler, who's been an enemy of mine for many years. He fought me in New York, unsuccessfully, by the way. I've had great success against Jerry. But he was representing Manhattan, and he would fight me all the time on the West Side Railroad yards, many times, very unsuccessfully. He failed. I come to Washington, I become president, and I said, oh no, I have Jerry Nadler again? So, Wall Street Journal, Mr. Mueller wasn't obstructed in any way. His copious report was released for all to see, and there was no collusion. This is the Wall Street Journal. And there was no collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. That's it. But they want to make this a big deal. Whether or not they carry the big I word out, I can't imagine that, but they probably would because they do whatever they have to do. I'll tell you, there's a danger here. If someday a Democrat becomes president and you have a Republican House, they can impeach him for any reason, or her. Any reason. We can't allow that to happen. We can't allow it to happen. So when you look at all of the transparency, when you look at all I've done, and I will tell you, my lawyers say, you don't have to do this. You can use presidential privilege. You don't have to let your lawyers and all of your staff testify. You can use presidential privilege, sir. Would you recommend it? Well, you can be transparent or you can be tight. If you've done nothing wrong, being transparent is better. So I said, I did nothing wrong. Let's be transparent. So that's what you have, all of these things. Look at that, all of these things, 500 witnesses that I allowed to testify. It's a disgrace. So when they get everything done, I'm all set to let's get infrastructure, let's get drug prices down. In the meantime, we're doing tremendous work without them. We're doing tremendous executive orders, a lot of work. We've had a great success, most successful economy perhaps in our country's history. We've cut regulations at a level that nobody else has cut them before. The largest tax cut in the history of the country. So we're doing a lot of work. Steve, yeah.
Did Nancy Pelosi give you any assurances that the House won't
this
move toward
was said. Because this meeting was set up a number of days ago at 11 o'clock. All of a sudden I hear last night they're going to have a meeting right before this meeting to talk about the I word. The I word. Can you imagine? I don't speak to Russians about campaigns. When I went to Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, I don't say, oh, let's call Russia. Maybe they can. It's a hoax. The greatest hoax in history. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you view Congress as a co-equal branch of government, and do you respect their power of oversight?
I respect the courts. I respect Congress. I respect right here where we're standing. But what they've done is abuse. This is investigation number 4 on the same thing. probably 5. And it really started, I think, pretty much from the time we came down the escalator in Trump Tower. So I say to you that we're going to get everything done. We're doing a lot without them. Let them play their games. We're going to go down one track at a time. Let them finish up, and we'll be all set. Thank you, everybody.
Have you read the full Mueller report? Mr. President, have you read the Mueller report?
Guys, just a reminder, if you could mute your cell phones.
Thank you.
Tally ho. That's up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. This morning, we went to the White House for a follow-up meeting with the president, follow-up to a meeting we had a few weeks ago where we agreed on a dollar figure, where we agreed on the percentage of 80-20 in terms of responsibility, and we discussed some priorities about infrastructure. It was agreed at that time that we would return today to talk about how we would cover the cost of such a proposal. Last night, in the time in between, the president was making some sounds that we questioned how serious he could be if he was saying what he was saying. And last night, he put forth a letter saying that unless we passed the U.S., Mexico, Canada free trade agreement, there was no reason for us to, we couldn't go forward with infrastructure. We didn't see those two as related, but the fact is, hopeful, optimistic, and seeing the necessity for a big infrastructure initiative for our country, we went in the spirit of bipartisanship to find common ground with the president on this. He came into the room, made a statement that he made was, I won't even characterize it, but I will say this, and what I said after he left. Thomas Jefferson, when he was President of the United States, tasked his Secretary of the Treasury, Gallatin, to put forth an infrastructure proposal for the initiative for the country. It would follow the Lewis and Clark expedition, the Louisiana Purchase. It would be about the Erie Canal, Cumberland Road, things like that to build into America. 100 years later, Teddy Roosevelt did his infrastructure big initiative, and it was called the establishment of the National Park Service, the green infrastructure of America. We had hoped that we could give this president an opportunity to have a signature infrastructure initiative to create jobs, to improve the quality of life, to just do so much for our country on the ongoing, not only the jobs it created by building, but the commerce it would promote. And that included roads and bridges and mass transit, broadband into rural America and other underserved areas, clean water, wastewater, all of the things that have enormous needs. The American Society of Civil Engineers says it's in the trillions, the deficit we have. We're talking about a couple $2 billion. For some reason, maybe it was lack of confidence on his part, that he really couldn't match the greatness of the challenge that we have. Wasn't really respectful of the Congress and the White House working together. He just took a pass, and it just makes me wonder why he did that. In any event, I pray for the President of the United States, and I pray for the United States of America. I'm pleased to yield now to the distinguished Democratic leader of the Senate, Mr. Schumer.
Well, thank you, Speaker Pelosi, and to watch what happened in the White House would make your jaw drop. We Democrats believe in infrastructure. We believe our roads and bridges need repair. We believe that rural America, as well as inner city America, needs broadband. We believe that to bring clean, new energy around the country, we need a power grid, modernized and updated. We believe in modernizing our transportation fleet with electric cars. We believe in all these things. And so, despite signals in the previous few weeks that he might not be serious, we went forward. We came here very seriously. The president asked in his letter last night, where would Democrats spend the money on infrastructure? I was prepared to give him a 35-page plan detailing this in all the areas I mentioned and more that had the broad support of Senate and House Democrats. We were interested, we are interested in doing infrastructure. It's clear the president isn't. He is looking for every excuse, whether it was let's do trade first, or whether it was he's not going to pay for any funding, or whether today that there are investigations going on. Hello? There were investigations going on 3 weeks ago when we met, and he still met with us. But now that he was forced to actually say how he'd pay for it, he had to run away. And he came up with this pre-planned excuse. And one final point, it's clear that this was not a spontaneous move on the president's part. It was planned. When we got in the room, the curtains were closed. The president, there was a place for him at the front so he could stand and attempt to tell us why he wouldn't do infrastructure. And, of course, then he went to the Rose Garden with prepared signs that had been printed up long before our meeting. We want the president to do infrastructure. We want our Congress to perform its constitutional responsibilities and create jobs, create income, create wealth for the average American. We can do both. It's clear the president doesn't want to do any of that.
I just would add this one thing, that we had a very distinguished delegation to the Congress, very powerful House and Senate. As you can see, distinguished leader on the Appropriations Committee, Senator Patty Murray, Mr. Carper, the ranking member on the Committee of Jurisdiction that oversees some of what we're talking about here, Richie Neal, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the House, our distinguished Democratic leader in the House, Steny Hoyer. Where's Dick Durbin? Is he this way? The Senate Whip, or we call it Assistant Leader, whatever the title is in the Senate.
Number two.
Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, a leader on all of these issues in her committees in the Congress. Our Assistant Speaker, Mr. Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico. Our distinguished Whip of the House, Democratic Whip of the House, Mr. Clyburn, the chair of the, I love saying chair, the chair of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, appropriate to this discussion, Mr. DeFazio, and the top Democrat on the Finance Committee in the United States Senate, Ron Wyden. So we came with heft, with commitment, with knowledge, which hoped with a shared vision of creating this great jobs initiative for our country, and the spirit of President Eisenhower when he instituted the interstate highway system. It was important for jobs and mobility. It was a national security initiative, and it was bipartisan. Lyndon Johnson and Sam Rayburn in the House and Senate, the President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower, we had hoped that we could do something comparable. Unfortunately, the President isn't ready for that. Thank you all very much.
Pelosi,